This time, we are using Zoom, to which I can be in my house and our presenter, Dr. Steve Callender, can be in his office and he can share some screens with us. And so we're going to be talking about goals and settings. And it's a subject very interesting that he presented to our noon Greenville Rotary Club. Steve Callender, and I had to put my glasses on to read. Steve Callender has always been about helping people learn and helping people think differently to get better results. He has several decades of experience in the corporate world, mostly in learning and development, and earned his master's and education doctorate in adult learning from Virginia Tech. He set up his company, Effective Learning for Growth, just over 12 years ago and brought it to Greenville, North Carolina, 3 years ago. So today, our program is on goals, and from this point on, the cameras and microphones are yours, Steve.
Thank you, Javier. Let me start screen sharing here. Okay, this is a presentation that I did for the Greenville Noon Rotary Club, and I'm going to sort of repeat it here in case there are viewers who would be informed or inspired by doing a quick program on goal setting and resolutions. So why goals and why now? Well, we're in the beginning of a new year. And with the beginning of a new year, we always think of a fresh start, new goals. And so we often make New Year's resolutions. However, New Year's resolutions are actually pretty rarely kept for very long. In fact, by the first week of February, 80% have fallen by the wayside. And by the end of the year, almost none are still there. Almost none. The failure rate might not be all about self-discipline. I think that the failure rate is because people are trying for impossible goals, poorly conceived goals, or badly executed goals. So the program today is about how to do better goals and what your brains have to do with that. I think that goals are essential to achievement. If you don't set goals, you don't meet goals. There's professional goals, there's personal goals. And what we're going to do today is go over how to set better goals. Goals go from dreams to a vision, to a plan, to goal, to success. It's a reasonable progression from one to the other. With dreams, that's the realm of imagination and wishes. That's picturing yourself at the end of 2021 in some different circumstance. Vision is what might be. What's the best you could hope for at the end of this year? What do you dream of? Plans, well, that's a method of achieving an end, an orderly arrangement of the parts of a design or objective. I've always liked the engineering aspect of that. It sounds so precise and technical. A goal is a very special kind of plan. It's a plan that has heartfelt urgency. You have to want it. It has connection to your life, to your family, to your friends, to your organization. The more connected a goal is with others, the more likely it is that you will achieve it. And I believe that success can even be defined as the continuous achievement of meaningful goals. So if goals are important, how come they fail so often? I'm going to go over 5 mistakes that people make when they're setting goals. The first one that people make is they don't set any at all. The consequences of setting no goals at all are that you get stuck in a reactive mode. Every day is just one more onslaught of things being the same. Staying in a reactive mode is really not healthy or fun. It certainly is not productive. It's unlikely that without goals that you'll make any progress, because if you don't know where you're going, any direction will do. Instead, if you decide, if you craft and use goals, great goals, what you'll get instead is progress. So the first mistake is don't set any goals. The next one is not setting your own goals. When goals are externally imposed, they don't mean as much. You have to own your goals. I remember at one point, I was given an external goal when I worked for a company in Minnesota called Personnel Decisions. I had a goal set for me. It was a sales quota. I was not in sales, but they set a sales quota. And they said, Steve, you have to sell $500,000. Well, I left that company after 9 months, and I had in fact sold $750,000 instead. But the reason was that I made that goal my own. I made it mean something. It became heartfelt. And so I was able to achieve it. So when goals are not your own, when they're externally imposed, the consequences of that is you get compliance, but you don't get much motivation. When someone tells you what your goal is, and you don't take the step of owning that goal, it's unlikely that you're going to achieve it. If instead you own it by connecting it to something that you love, something that you care deeply about. First, own it. What I connected that sales goal with was not continuing at Personnel Decisions. It was not earning more money because there were no commissions involved, just the quota. But what I was able to connect it with was helping people learn. And I helped people learn at a couple of very large clients that let me exceed my goal. You have to make it a vivid meaning. You have to give meaning for success. The goal needs to mean something to you, and the more real and vivid you can make it, the better. So that's what you can do instead of having goals set for you. Own them and make them vivid, give them vivid meaning for your success. Next mistake is don't write them down and don't keep them present. Consequence of not writing them down and keeping them present is, well, of course, they disappear. You know, the phrase out of sight, out of mind certainly comes to mind. If you don't have your goals written down, it's very easy to forget them. Instead, what I recommend, based on having been a coach for several decades, is first, write them down. Second, review them. Third, keep them with you in plain sight. And set reminders. So if you write them down and keep them in front of you, you'll be a lot more likely to remember them and achieve them. There's one other thing I just want to quickly mention, and that is that when you write down your goals, they should be positive. A goal like don't smoke cigarettes is not a good goal because it has a negative in it. Our brains don't process the negative quite the way we think they do. If you are trying to stop something and you say, don't do this, sometimes your brain doesn't hear the don't and you actually do it. So keep the goals positive and keep them written down. The next mistake in goal setting is that the goals are not SMART. Now, SMART is an acronym that's very important in goal setting. It stands for specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-bound. Let's look at what that means. The consequences, if you make goals that are not specific and measurable, you can't tell how you're doing. You know, if the goal is some amorphous, lumpy, undefined thing, you can't tell if you're getting closer to it or not. And that's why one of the things that I recommend is, instead of milestones, when you make goals, set inch pebbles instead, so that you can achieve some success measurably every day. Every time you begin to work on your goal, you make that much progress. A little bit of progress every day can keep you motivated. And you have to be specific and measurable for that to happen. Next is the ambitious and realistic. That's a combination that if you don't get it right, the consequence is very low motivation. When people set goals, sometimes they set goals that are too hard, that are almost impossible. Sometimes people set goals that are so easy, they can't even keep your attention. Psychologists that I've known have told me that an ideal goal should have about a 50-50 chance. That is, you think you can do it, but there's some doubt. You might not be able to do it. When a goal is about 50% likely, that's motivating. That's challenging. When it's too big, you give up before you even try. When it's too small, you can't get yourself motivated for it. And finally, time-bound. If it's not time-bound, you're going to let it slip. It has no accountability and no planning value. So instead, if you make SMART goals, you can track them, you can diagnose and correct how you're doing in your progress towards your goal. And you can celebrate. One of the important things with goals is that you acknowledge progress. You give yourself a pat on the back. You set up some rewards. Over the last many months, I've lost about 30 pounds. And I had that goal specifically. Specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-bound. I wanted to be down below 180 in time to start running in the summer. And I made it. One of the things that I did to celebrate is I had a Godiva chocolate bunny, a little chocolate Easter bunny thing. And I kept that in plain sight with 180 written on the side of it with a Sharpie. And when I got to 180, I let that be my reward. We celebrate success is an important part of achieving goals. And the last mistake that I'll suggest is too many. When you have too many goals, you can't keep track of them all. You can't keep them all in mind. Our mental capacity is actually fairly limited. And if you have 10 goals, you won't even remember them all. The consequences of having too many goals are anomie, which is a psychological term for deer in the headlights. It's when you are so overwhelmed that you don't know what to do first. You don't know what to do next. And that's not pleasant. You may achieve a few goals, or more likely you'll achieve none of them. So instead of setting too many goals, keep 2 to 5 goals that are SMART, that are reviewed often, that are intensely connected with what you value. If you do that, you're much more likely to achieve those goals. And by keeping them, a few of them in sight, keeping them connected, reviewing them often, it's able to guide your choices and behavior. So that's what the 5 mistakes are. Here's how you can not achieve goals. Make none, don't write them down, don't make them your own. If they're not SMART, or if you have too many, that's how you can mess this goal thing up. Now, I'm also very interested in neuroscience. Yes. Yes, Javier.
Steve, before you go ahead, changing, basically what we're saying here is that the goal should be yours. Because when you're talking about business, those are business plans and you don't have all the control. When they tell you you have to sell $1 million or dollars, for example, but if you don't have the right product for the clients, or the clients have, their way where the client is going is different from your company, and you don't have control to change that. So when you set a goal like that, it will fail, basically. How many times
Mhm.
we see that? And of course, corporate will say, well, it's your fault you didn't sell. Yeah, but you didn't give me the right product, or the client didn't want it at that time, that particular product, or
Right.
things have changed in the environment. If I'm selling international and there's some problem in that country, no matter how many millions you have sold before, if there's a problem with customs or transportation that you don't have control. I think the important thing is that you have to have control of your own goals.
Yes,
Am I correct?
that's a great point, Javier. Absolutely. Yeah, it has to for a for for anyone to be able to achieve a goal, it has to be within their power of control. That is, there are external circumstances. Other people will do things. There will be tariffs imposed. There will be international strife. There will be all kinds of things that can get in the way of goals that are not personal goals that are your own. And when you have an externally imposed goal, like sell $1 million, you have to find ways to make it your own and look at what can I do, what can I say, what can I even think that's within my control to make this happen. So agency, the power to do something with a goal, is really important. That's a great point. Thanks for adding that, Javier. It's very, very important. Yeah, there are things that are in your control and
You
not
know,
in
I
your
didn't,
control.
my image didn't come when I talk. I don't know if you can do something for that.
I wasn't aware of that. I I can see us both up in the corner of the screen.
Oh, okay, well,
Okay.
that's fine. Let's continue.
Okay. Okay. Uh, I've long been interested in neuroscience and how our brains work. And some of the things I've learned there directly relate to goal setting. And there are some tips and tricks that can help you with goal setting based on the way our brains work. And let me give a quick version of this. Basically, our brains are dynamic and responsive. Essentially, we respond to things internally or externally, first in the amygdala area, that is the limbic system. Emotions come first, then come thoughts, finally come words. And as we encounter some situation that we find threatening to something that's important to us, that sends us on down into the brain stem, into the primitive brain. And this is when we have the stress response of fight, flight, or freeze. That is, this part of our brain is about as smart as a reptile. It sometimes is even called a reptilian brain. And it will respond to the external environment under stress by fighting or fleeing or freezing. That's not where we do our best thinking. When we do our best thinking, we advance up toward the higher parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where the executive function resides. That's the part of our brain that's behind our foreheads, right up here. And when we have our thoughts helping our brains, we think better. We actually see things that we couldn't otherwise see. They've tested this in laboratory settings by giving people hormones that the brain naturally produces externally so that they have a boost either of the stress chemical or the positive chemistry, and done perceptual tests of field of vision and have actually found that people under stress get tunnel vision. Everything closes in. They literally can't see the solution. And when people are under different brain chemistry, the positive brain chemistry, chemicals like oxytocin, the hugging chemical, this is what we feel when we're in the presence of a loved one and when we feel high levels of trust. When those chemicals are present, we can literally see solutions. We can use the best of our brains more creatively. Our field of vision actually widens. So that's basic brain stuff. And our brains are also programmed to avoid danger and seek reward. But in evolutionary terms, guess which one gets priority? Yep, avoiding danger. We are primed to spot the negative. If there are 10 positive things in the environment and one negative, the negative will usually get our attention. That's why it's so important to set positive goals, to keep them there in the forefront of our brains. So our brains are primed to avoid danger and seek reward. There are a few things based on David Rock's book, Your Brain at Work. There are a few certain things that our brains simply crave, that when these things are put at risk, it activates the part of our brain that's responding stressfully as if in danger. And when these needs are met, our brains are happy. And we use the positive brain chemistry and get the best from our brains. So here are the 5 things that David Rock's book suggests our brains crave. First is status. As we evolved, we're always looking at what is our status in our family, in our tribe, in our group, in our church, in our business. We're always acutely aware of our status and any threats to our status or changes in our status. We're always looking at that. Our brains are always checking that. Next is certainty. You ever wonder why puzzle games and computer games are so addictive? It's because every time you solve this piece of the puzzle, you get a little boost of dopamine, serotonin, and other brain chemistry that is associated with reward. So as you play Angry Birds or do the other puzzle games, every time you solve part of the puzzle, you're getting a little hit, a little bit of reward. That's because our brains crave certainty. And when something is ambiguous or uncertain, we crave to resolve it. And that's very rewarding when we get a little bit of resolution. The next thing our brains crave is autonomy. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. Nobody likes to be told exactly what to do and how to do it all the time. We crave to have some sense of agency, of ownership, of being in charge of our own destiny. And this certainly gets at goal setting, doesn't it? Next is relatedness. We're always looking at the relationships that we're in, not just for status, but for the health of the relationship, for any signs of conflict. We're looking always for relatedness, how we connect to other people. That's one of the things that's made this pandemic so hard, is that loss of human connection. And finally, the last thing we're looking for is fairness. We're always looking to see if we're being treated fairly and if we can trust the person that we're dealing with. We're always monitoring that. And when anything threatens the fairness of a situation, our brains react in a very primitive way. So those are the 5 things. They make a nice acronym. I like acronyms. This one's SCARF as a way to remember it. Whether a threat is real or imagined, it has exactly the same response from the brain. Let me give you an example. There was an experiment at University of Wisconsin, River Falls, where they have a wonderfully sensitive functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, machine. It makes a movie of exactly what your brain is doing. And it's really interesting because they can ask people to think about a certain thing to see which parts of the brain literally light up. Well, they put some people through this in a little experiment. In the experiment, the person was put into this machine and they saw a video of two cartoon characters up on the screen. These two characters were throwing a ball back and forth, and sometimes they'd throw it to the person who was in the machine virtually. And the person could catch it with their hand and throw it back to the one on the left or the one on the right. And so they were measuring and monitoring the movie of this person's brain while they were doing this game of catch with two imaginary people. So what happened was they monitored the brain, and the brain was happy. It was feeling good. It was feeling connection with this. And then they switched the movie around, and the two stick figures, the two cartoon figures, quit sharing the ball. So suddenly this person was being excluded. The status, the relatedness, even the fairness, all lit up. And the part of the brain that lit up in response to this social exclusion from these cartoon characters was actually exactly the same parts of the brain that register pain. So there was no difference in the brain between physical pain and imagined social exclusion. Same parts of the brain lit up. So whether it's an expectation that one of these five might be endangered, or if it's an actual real threat, makes no difference to the brain. The brain works, the brain responds the same either way. So what does this say about goal setting? Well, we're looking for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. That's what our brains want. And let's think about the goal setting. With status, what you're doing when you're setting goals is you're imagining your future self with the goal achieved. And you're imagining what meaning that has for your place in the family, the town, the business, the club. So when you're imagining that, you're actually activating the parts of the brain that will be active when it comes true. So you're using the best of your brain in terms of status, because achieving the goal is going to increase or at least maintain your status. Uncertainty, it's setting a path and you're achieving those inch pebbles that I mentioned before. With autonomy, well, if you're the one setting your own goals, you can check the autonomy box. For relatedness, in Rotary, we have a 4-way test where of all the things we say and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? One thing you can do for relatedness and goal setting is find an accountability partner. An accountability partner is kind of like a peer coach. It's someone who's a friend, an acquaintance, a business associate with whom you can build a relationship where you share your goals and they share their goals and you both hold each other accountable. I had an accountability partner several years ago who really helped me a lot, and I helped him a lot. We met for coffee once a week. We reviewed what progress we'd made toward our goals. And part of my progress toward my goals is because I didn't want to have to tell Steve Tasler that I hadn't done anything. I didn't want to do that. And I knew I was going to meet him for coffee on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. So having an accountability partner can really help with the relatedness goal. And you can even have group goals and group connection. I went through a program for weight loss called Noom, where they have virtual groups, little chat groups, where you share your progress with other people. Now, I never physically met any of these people. I don't even know what most of them looked like. But it was a group where I could have some relatedness and connection, some commiseration, some encouragement, and some accountability. So setting goals with somebody else or with several other people can make a huge difference for the achievement of your goals and also for your enjoyment as you achieve them, because it's giving you something that your brain needs. Finally, with fairness, I'm not sure how that relates to goal setting. Depending on the goal, it may reduce some victim thinking. So you can achieve a little greater fairness if you can get past victim thinking. So that's a brief piece about the brain and goal setting. Turns out that the 5 things that your brain most craves are 5 things that can be satisfied by making and achieving goals. So what if, let's imagine here for a moment, what if 2021 is truly a goal-driven year for you? What would that mean? Well, I hope it will mean enough that you'll invest the time and attention to connect your dreams with vision. Connect your vision with your plans. Embody your plans into goals and turn your goals into daily thinking habits. Because with that, you can achieve goals. So that's the presentation.
Well,
At this point, I open it up for questions. So Javier, what questions?
No, it's very interesting. It makes a point that the goals have to be real personal, and it's how the individual controls. Sometimes in religion, when Lent comes in, people say, I will not drink during those 40 days of Lent. And some of them might struggle, or I'm not going to eat candy, or I'm going to do this or the other, but at least they do what they say they were going to do, and they stick to it. And then it comes the big celebration, the day of Easter, that they accomplish their goals. I have 2 daughters that they were goals oriented, that the only school they wanted to attend was UNC Chapel Hill. Don't mention any other school. That's where they wanted to go. And they did achieve the goal. They both graduated, were accepted and graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. But they were both goal oriented on that point. And that's what this is all about. You set up what you plan to do. Maybe I'm not an individual for goals because I guess in the environment that I grew up in Latin America, we were not goal oriented on that. We just did things, but not necessarily because, okay, it's New Year's and I'm going to set my goal this year. This is what I plan to do. And probably everybody said, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. And like you said, came February and those goals were gone. Mm-hmm. It depends also how supportive the people around you is for you to achieve that goal. Sometimes those goals are forced by your health, that
Yes.
you have to lose weight. Otherwise, you might end up 6 feet under if you
Hmm.
don't do it. Or because you had a heart attack and you have to change completely the way, and you have to go slowly, one by one.
And
When my father-in-law quit smoking, he will hit the walls, but it
mhm.
was on his own benefit to do it.
Yeah,
So it's very, very interesting, especially in the environment in which we live. Now, technology allows to have friends everywhere that could be supportive of you.
yep.
Like you said, you might not know him, but you have friends on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram that are really committed to what
Hmm.
you're doing or to helping you. So that's something that we didn't have several years ago. Now you cannot complain that there's nobody to cry to. There'll be somebody that
Yes.
will, accept you for what you are.
Yep. And that satisfies the brain's need for connection, for relatedness. And
Yep.
you're absolutely right. Now with the technology, especially as we all get used to the technology because of the pandemic, we can do a lot of things at a distance that we could never do before.
Yep.
I,
Well,
I
we
had
were,
I had one coaching client who actually found me on the internet because of an internet radio show that I did several years back. She found that radio show. She found me through Facebook, and she asked if I was still doing this particular kind of coaching. And I was. We did. I worked with her for about 3 months, and I got to know her very, very well, but I was never in the same place with her, even once, because she was in London. I was able to coach her while she was in London, and after she moved from London to New York, and then back to London. So it was an interesting thing how close you can get through the technology and how wide the reach can be, because there's literally no reason that you can't do a lot of very important and good things. Javier, when I first moved down here 3 years ago, almost to the day, all of my clients in my business were in Minnesota. They, most of them still are. So for the first 3 years, I've been doing coaching remotely uh, through Zoom with essentially all of my clients. And it's been good. It's not as good as real thing. It's not as good as in person. I think there is still something important for bonding about actually being able to break bread together, being in each other's presence. But you can do a lot with goal setting remotely, and you can get a lot of support remotely. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
I want to use this opportunity to plug something for the Salvation Army in this broadcast, because the new Rotary Club, our club, helps out the Salvation Army with ringing of the bell and other things. And I just want to make a little plug for them, because on Friday, January 22nd, they're opening the new thrift store. The old store that was on Dickinson Avenue now is moved to 2700 South Memorial Drive. And that's be, a good thing for the Salvation Army with all the good that they do in this area. So I just wanted to plug that there's a new store open on January 22nd.
Now, is that
And
at
I
the big
guess,
new Salvation Army building that's there by the post office
yes,
annex?
it's next to the Salvation Army building. There's the thrift store of the Salvation Army. You can miss it. It's a big building also.
That's great.
And well, this will be the end of our program. I hope that we can do so many more. Now the technology has opened, a myriad of things that we can do. I was just thinking right now that I'm gonna get my brother on this because he's in Guatemala. He's a medical doctor, so we can talk about COVID with him, for example, how they're handling the pandemic. But also, he's a newspaper editor. So I want to know what's going on with this caravan that is in Guatemala now, and what can we expect? What is Guatemala doing? Because you got thousands of people trying to break into your country. You're trying to control a pandemic, and these people are coming through, and you don't know if they're already carrying the virus or they might contract the virus. So that's a big question that affects us in a way. So I might use this technology and probably talk about. Now, another thing, yesterday, President Biden opened up, and now they're saying he's talking about amnesty for the undocumented. The last time we had amnesty in the United States was during Ronald Reagan. So now there's this idea floating, because I have to go to Congress, and we don't know how Congress is going to react on that. So opens up a lot of discussion on the subject that people need to know. And one of the biggest fallacies, and I'm using time here, is because we hear the word, oh, they're going to do a path to citizenship. And that's a mistake. Because if you're undocumented, the first thing they're going to do is, if they're going to legalize you in the US, you're going to get either a work permit or a residency. You cannot force anybody to be a citizen of the United States. That's a voluntary decision. Mm-hmm. I became a resident, and after I fulfilled the number of years I had to be a resident, then I decided to become a US citizen. But you cannot force anybody to become a citizen. But the mentality is that they're giving you a path to citizenship. What about if they don't want to? For many years, Mexicans that were legal residents didn't become U.S. citizens. You know why? Because they were afraid if they have a little piece of land in Mexico, if you became a citizen of another country, you could lose that ejido, as they call it.
I did not know that.
Well, now they don't do it anymore. But for a long, long time, Mexicans were not becoming U.S. citizens because of that particular thing. So when the law changed in their country, now the ones that were legal residents decided to become U.S. citizens. So there are many things going on that public access channel is a good way to communicate without the constraint of a 15 seconds spot on TV.
Well, and I look forward to the next ones that we will record.
Okay.
So thank you, Javier.
If you want, please push turn off the record